It takes a lot to scare me nowadays. This is an unfortunate truth I've had to encounter in my forays into the horror genre in the last few years alone. Now, I'm not what you would call exactly a horror nut. I understand there's an entire subset of film fans who are deeply obsessed with everything the genre has to offer, attending conventions and geeking out over the most violent movie releases in the space, with definitive horror classics ranking as their all-time favorites. However, I'm also not someone who avoids the horror genre like the plague, too terrified to jump headfirst into these offerings out of fear for how I'll react to them. Rather, I kind of approach the horror genre with varied indifference, as it's neither my least favorite thing on earth nor the genre of film I look forward to the most. Now, I appreciate horror when it's done right, as it can be quite effective, spine-tingling, and overall enthralling from start to finish. But that is indeed the key factor that needs to be in play in the genre, which is startling to examine in the modern-day horror landscape that just is the exact opposite of that. Rather, I approach the horror genre in the way of modest expectation now because I've been burned many times before, by nothing but weak and superficial offerings in the space that seek to capitalize off the highs of previous horror movies, while never delivering something different or fresh in the space itself. A lot of horror nowadays is derivative, for lack of a better term, and as someone who has to watch these movies to review them, it's something I've noticed time and time again. It almost feels like these movies see each other and try to copy different elements or structures from each other, building up to an approximation that never feels wholly sustaining or complete in the end. And honestly, this is unfortunate, especially when considering that horror at its very core is a genre that openly invites creativity and originality in terms of artistic expression. And when these movies are able to openly showcase this element, it can be something truly magical to behold. The problem is, however, that this is few and far between in the modern day film landscape, which makes it difficult to stay engaged with many of the releases in the last few years alone. This is the mindset with which I approached Curry Barker's new film Obsession last weekend as I sat down for its Texas premiere at the South by Southwest Film Festival. Now, heading into this film, I knew pretty much next to nothing. I knew that this film had played at the Toronto International Film Festival last fall and audiences went insane for it. It was snatched up for distribution by Focus Features and had funding attached from Blumhouse, who themselves are a very formidable name in the horror space nowadays. However, aside from these facts, I really knew nothing much about the core thematic content or intent of the project itself. The trailers released did a great job at hiding the subject matter and material of the story, and only offered a sort of rudimentary overview to engage audiences. However, as I was at a horror and genre-focused film festival, I figured I might as well check it out to see if the hype was warranted. I stood outside in line for an hour before getting into this movie in the theater, and the crowd in line with me was abuzz with the excited conversation of audience members showcasing their love and energy heading into the film. I grabbed a bottle of water from the concession stand and settled in the back of the auditorium of the State Theater, a tight and fairly cozy space to take in a horror movie with an audience. When I watched the movie, I selected a seat on the end of an aisle, with stairs leading up to a darkened hallway and exit behind my shoulder. Such a detail might seem out of place in this review, but I'll shortly get back to it later and you'll see how it ties in the end. As I sat in the theater preparing myself to experience this film, I shockingly found that I was not hesitant or fearful heading into this film, which usually is not a good sign for me. I find that I'm often nervous heading into horror movies, especially ones I know very little about as well. So the fact that I actually wasn't heading into Obsession might have actually been a blessing in disguise considering how this affected me in the end. As the lights dimmed and the South by Southwest pre-show began, I just really hoped that this would be one of those horror movies that truly showcased originality and promise in an otherwise stale and stagnant genre. And this was exactly the case. I will not sugarcoat it. Obsession terrified me to my core. I started off the film leaning back in my seat, then increasingly leaned forward as the nightmarish film progressed, ultimately so enamored as my eyes never left the screen. Obsession is, simply put, one of the scariest films I've seen in quite some time. And I think one of the reasons the film masterfully pulls this off is because it doesn't seem like it would be on its surface, even if you know the premise going in. It's one of those movies where you really just look at it and you think to yourself foolishly, how scary can that even be? It turns out, really scary, especially in the hands of a filmmaker like Curry Barker, who understands how to draw out tension and paranoia to affect his audience. It's genuinely impressive how much this film managed to affect me. I haven't felt this much dread and anxiety watching a movie in a while, as pure unabashed terror and anxiety filled me with every second as the film barrels along its progression towards its nightmare scenario at conclusion. Let me show you how much this movie affected me. You know how I mentioned before at the start of this review how I sat on the end of a row with dark steps leading up over my shoulder? Well, as the film progressed and the situation became so much more prevalent, terrifying, and unnerving, I, for some inexplicable reason, felt like I was being watched. I literally checked over my shoulder multiple times during the movie, only to see the darkness of the hallway and the soft glow of an exit sign hanging over a door at the end of it. However, when it happened for the third or fourth time in the movie, the feeling couldn't be ignored any longer. And so during one of the most intense moments of the movie, I looked back one more time, and in the darkness, I saw a security guard hired by Focus Features to supervise the movie was actually just staring at me from the darkness. And when I tell you I almost jumped out of my skin, I mean it. I was terrified. You see, Obsession is a movie that sinks deep into your subconsciousness and most importantly, stays there. It's a movie that's viscerally affecting and haunting in the moment, but it takes on another layer entirely as you sit in contemplation after viewing it, mulling over everything in depth as you contextualize this wild ride. It's a movie I haven't stopped thinking about since viewing it, and for good reason. There are scenes in this movie that are just ingrained in my head that I have a feeling I won't be able to shake anytime soon. Obsession is, like its core premise, something that never wants to leave your side. And that's what is so horrifying about it. Obsession follows the story of Bear, played by Michael Johnston, a music store employee living a mundane life and existence in a small town. He faces insurmountable pressures in his romantic life in the form of Nikki, played by Indy Navarrete, a childhood friend of Bear's that he starts to take a deeper liking to. Desperate to convince his love to Nikki, even though he knows she won't reciprocate the feeling, Bear wanders into a magic shop in town one day and finds a mysterious box on a shelf in the back, holding some items that are called One Wish Willows. The rules of the product are simple. Break the willow in half while saying your wish and you'll get everything your heart desires. Bear at first is hesitant to try the product, thinking it's the stuff of legend and childish folklore. However, in one desperate venture late at night, Bear breaks the willow out of the box, states, "I wish Nikki loved me more than anyone in the entire world," and snaps it in half. In what begins over the course of the hour and 48-minute runtime of Obsession is unlike anything you can possibly expect going in. Obsession is a film that manages to execute its core premise in such a fresh and wholly unique way. Often, the cautionary wish tales can seem overdone or overwrought, as if filmmakers are running into a creative dead end with how to proceed in such a space. However, Barker manages to take this tired premise, ramps its energy up to an absolute 10, and unleashes the effect onto audiences while simultaneously sitting back and watching it unfold with glee. And the result is nothing short of wild. One of the greatest things about Obsession is that it is not a movie that telegraphs its direction or surprises along the way. Rather, it's unpredictable, unrestrained, and above all, motivated. It never allows its audience an understanding into where the progression of its plot is going until the moment it happens, meaning every jolt and moment of impact is more than felt by viewers. And speaking of every jolt, we have to discuss some of the scares here, because a lot of them are just simply not okay in the slightest. Curry Barker is a filmmaker that seems to have mastered the art of the jump scare, in that many of these similar moments in the film rattled me to my absolute core and my audience as well if their screams were any indication. What is so genius about these moments here is how Barker draws audiences into a false illusion of safety, slowing down the meticulous pacing in between moments and gaining audience trust, only to then literally rip the rug out from underneath you with no warning whatsoever. I'm not going to spoil anything specific here, but I will say there is a single jump scare in here that might possibly be one of the scariest moments from any horror movie in the last 10 years alone. And I mean every second of that statement. To say I flew out of my chair probably is not far off from the truth. It's the type of movie that leaves your heart beating violently in your chest as you come down from that adrenaline high. Add to that the fact that the film balances these jump scare moments with a deep-set psychological horror, and you have such a well-rounded horror film that manages to scare its audience with the abundance of tools at its disposal. Obsession is a deeply disturbing and uncomfortable film that I would equate to the experience of that of watching a train wreck happen in slow motion. Like, you know for a fact that the result of this will not be good at all, and you see the warning signs well ahead along the way. But the film places you in such a vulnerable position where you can't do anything to prevent it no matter how hard you want to or try. The result is a situation that plays out that is nothing short of horrific, leading to moments where you almost just want to cover your eyes and will it be all over. Part of this horror stems from the core performances with the entirety of the runtime, especially in the form of one of the scariest characters put to film in the last several years, Nikki. Indy Navarrete is a performer I was not familiar with heading into this film, but I sure am now, and you should be too, because my gosh, what a performance here. Watching Navarrete at work in this film is like watching a master at play, with meticulous care and effort put into every detail of her performance. What starts off as a mild-mannered and typical role soon turns into something completely nightmarish and inescapable, and the quick turn that Navarrete conveys is nothing short of mesmerizing. Her performance in this movie is perhaps one of the best horror performances I've seen since Toni Collette in Hereditary, and that should tell you all you need to know about the intensity brought to this one. Stand alongside Navarrete, Michael Johnston does a deeply deeply charismatic and effortless job as Bear, the central tenet of the story who propels the plot points along. It's easy to fall in love with Bear as a character, as you really do feel bad for him in his loner aspect of his characterization, and his desire to make at least one meaningful connection in the hustle and bustle of his own life. That this desire leads him into the darkest depths of his own reality is a cruel twist of fate, and as it plays out, Johnston does a fantastic job holding his own opposite a powerhouse like Navarrete, with their small interactions and moments serving as the core of why the material works so well. Cooper Tomlinson does a great job as Ian, Bear's friend who strives to give him advice along the way, and almost serves as the comedic foil for levity and warmth amid this otherwise barren and desolate nightmare plane of a film. And I even loved seeing Andy Richter in a bit part, where although he might not contribute much to the overall plot, is still an absolute delight to see sporadically throughout the film. I know I've implied it at many key points along this review, but it cannot be overstated enough. Obsession is by far one of the most shocking films I've seen in quite some time. This is the most caught off guard I've been by a film in a while, and there are so many moments of this where I struggled to process them as I went along, almost in a sense of disbelief at how far this film is willing to go with its core material. This is also a factor when mentioning how gory and otherwise graphic the film is, which definitely comes with a viewer discretion warning itself. Curry Barker mentioned in an interview that the film almost got an NC-17 rating upon its first edit, at one of the pivotal scenes in the movie which left in far too much graphic content, and honestly, I'm shocked the final product itself didn't get that rating, which I mean in the most complimentary way I possibly can. So much of Obsession just feels cruel and mean, for lack of a better term, with moments of impact that genuinely feel nauseating and disorienting, and therefore give you a front row seat alongside Bear into this absolute madness. I mean, I had to look away from the screen at so many moments of this movie, which rarely happens for me within horror media nowadays. This movie does not hold anything back, and honestly, I find it's all the better for it. You see, within this grotesque and deeply disturbing content, the reason I walked away absolutely loving Obsession is because it's a movie that genuinely has so much to say about modern romance culture, and spins it around in a way that's really fun within the horror genre. It seems like so many people are always chasing the highs of a relationship, wanting to be involved with a significant other while ignoring the real heart of care and attraction that matters underneath. In this way, Obsession is almost portraying a similar scenario. Bear is granted a wish that satisfies his ultimate desires in the form of love and admiration. However, this love and admiration is only superficial, leading to a scenario that becomes increasingly more paranoid and devoid of any semblance of that same good-natured love that people cherish underneath. As a horror movie, Obsession doesn't convey its core premise or material in a way that feels over the top or superficial. Rather, it's scary and effective because it feels actually plucked from real life. The dialogue between characters feels natural and nuanced, and the core stakes and tension also feel choreographed in a way that just feels present. This is conveyed expertly through the confined cinematography of Taylor Clemens and the ethereal and haunting music score from Rock Burwell, which are both genuinely unsettling with how much they reveal with so little at the same time. The framing of this film is just otherworldly, with so much attention drawn not just within the subject matter of specific scenes, but also the spooky and really haunting details in the background, which actually caused such a visceral reaction within me. Overall, to say I was anything other than thoroughly impressed with Obsession would be an inaccurate statement. I'd go so far as to say this is one of the best horror movies I've seen in quite some time, and genuinely instilled me with passion and hope for the horror genre itself, which is so important nowadays. If anything, I find that if I had to dock Obsession for one or two elements that lower my ultimate score, it would be slight pacing issues in the middle act, and a tone in one or two points of the film that can't decide whether it needs to be overtly serious or more comedic. Otherwise, when this film grabs you, it grabs you completely, and you will not have seen anything like this film ever before, and I think that's the biggest compliment I can actually give it. I forgot how fun it could be to walk into a film knowing next to nothing and unraveling it as you go, and I find that Obsession is perhaps the best movie you could do this practice with this year alone. This is why my advice for any prospective audience members watching this review is just go see this in a theater with a packed, sold-out crowd. This is a movie that is going to get a lot of people talking about it upon its release in May, and it's easy to see why. It's the kind of movie where you will not forget your experience viewing it, and in a climate where the threat of movie theater extinction seems to be looming closer as the days progress, it's this type of communal movie-going experience that makes all the difference and reminds us of why we love cinema as an art form overall. I cannot say enough good things about Obsession in both form and execution, and if audiences are willing to give this one a chance, they'll discover a story about love and admiration that is as scary as it is inspired and artistic. Fair warning though that this one is terrifying. Do not say I didn't warn you. That's why I'm giving Obsession a 4.5 out of 5 stars. Obsession releases in theaters May 15th. Hey guys, thanks so much for watching this review on my channel. If you're new around here and you like the content you see, don't forget to click that subscribe button down below, like the video, and turn on push notifications. Also, leave comment suggestions down below for future video, essay, and review topics. With that being said, until next time, this is Mitchell signing off. Peace out.